3 minutes past, and
Yeah, let's do it.
let's go over. And then so do you want to introduce yourself, or
Sure, I
yeah,
can do
since
that.
we're just a
Yeah,
small
I've got
number of
like
people?
second slide in or so, and actually
Yeah,
Suruchi knows everything that I'm about to say about myself anyway.
it's just me and Anne. Uh, yeah,
Let me get my
the
screen
floor is
share going
yours.
here. Do my fancy screen share stuff. See if I can get all that working. Do. And do screen. Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, this was supposed to be easier than this. I'm so sorry. There we go. Share that. There. So you can see
There we
the
go.
first slide. All right.
Yes.
Excellent. So welcome to Awareness to Act. Yeah, we're going to talk a bit about unlocking your influence. And yeah, obviously, I'm just excited to be here. The Reflect Festival is amazing. Just hearing some of the things that have already taken place and they're coming up. It's really an amazing festival. I love the celebration of it. And thank you, Patrick and Dandy People, for hosting. Definitely appreciate that as well. As far as myself, my name is Mark Wavle. I'm a professional Scrum trainer with scrum.org and have my CBAP from IIBA. For my day job, I'm work at Insight Digital Innovation as the US Agile lead, and I do Agile coaching. Outside of work, husband for 25 years this year. My wife and I have been married and a father to 2 teenage boys that we adopted from Guatemala. And also do some music stuff and lead worship, and in the spare time beyond that, you can tell I also like taking assessments because there's a lot of banners down there at the bottom. As I'm gonna kind of just skim through real quick here our Insight approach. I will say that from an Agile perspective, one of the things that I love about the way we do Agile at Insight is that we, in that third box there, everything we can do, we can teach you how to do. And that's really some of what you're seeing here today, is that we just like what we do, we love so much that we want to enable others to do it. And that's really where success is from an Agile perspective. And I know just from my time with a few people at Dandy People, that's theirs as well, right? Enabling others agility is really where it's at. We're not just doing it for, but with, so that it's your agility that you can continue to grow and be nimble in. So this is, let me just give you a little background to the topic and why it's important to me, and hopefully how it can help you as a result as well. What Awareness to Act, how it all started was I was working at a regional bank, mid-sized bank, and working with a brand new team that was doing pretty good um, by most definitions, I guess you'd say, was doing pretty good. And then it kind of hit a wall, as these things are wont to do many times, where the progression just didn't really get going. You know, it stalled out is probably the nicest way to put it. And a couple of things I noticed in that that became particularly acute to me because I was mentoring the Scrum Master. So in addition to being in this situation and getting frustrated that I felt like my influence was impeded, I was trying to bring up another change agent and another person and show them how to influence at the same time I was struggling to influence. If you ever taught somebody something or mentored somebody through something, you know what I'm talking about. It like brings a totally different perspective to it and requires something entirely different of you. And that's the spot I was in. To say it was cognitive dissonance would be the nicest clinical way I could say it. It was a big struggle for me at that point. How do I help him learn Scrum Mastership when I'm struggling in my influence? And you know, the way that I tended to look at it was I had this toolbox of things that I could draw from to help in situations like that. And I had a lot of tools in there. And, you know, my favorite hammer, so to speak, well-worn hammer would be facilitation technique. And so when I got blocked, I would go look for another facilitation technique and say, oh, this looks like it'll help. Patrick was just mentioning liberating structures. I remember the day I learned about those. Those are amazing, tremendous facilitation techniques that are very useful. And I'm not trying to diminish or degrade the value of the tools, but what I found is I was hunting for the next tool that I could add to my toolkit, right? The next screwdriver or saw or something, a shiny tool. And And I found it wasn't helping. Is really what it came down to. It was really sad because these are amazing tools, but they were helping just a little bit, but I wasn't really seeing the shift and the improvement. After we got going and got that initial success, it just kind of stalled, and that was frustrating to me. So the things that I'm going to go through here were learned in community, and I strongly recommend that recommend that to you as well. Everything here, take it to community because you're going to learn a lot that way. This was developed, started to be developed there at that regional bank, and has grown since then with a lot of other coaches and teammates, and the Scrum Master that I was mentoring, and a number of others in our learning cohorts at Insight and with our other clients. So what I discovered, the way I tend to think is very principled, and I like to chunk things down. Here's how I now look at my cognitive dissonance, is that I had 3 major challenges. I had an awareness challenge, and that challenge was that I only saw what I was looking for. I kind of limited my field of view and my vision, so it was pretty narrow. And then in addition to that, I also had an analysis problem, and that is that I assumed I knew why those few things I was looking for were happening, and I assumed I knew what was important about them. And then finally, I had an action problem, and that's what I was describing, that I used the tools and techniques I was comfortable with. Sometimes I would start in the middle analysis, assuming I knew why something was happening, what was important. And then I would go to awareness and look for things that were happening that would, support that, or actions that I thought would help with what I assumed the problem was. And other times I would start with a tool. Like I'd say, oh, this really cool liberating structure maybe. And then I would try and find, I would come up with, well, yeah, I've seen the team have that type of problem, and here's the evidence that supports that. Kind of like a doctor, maybe who's, suddenly said, oh, here's a new drug that can help, and then they'll be like, hey, I think you might have, right? I diagnose you with what this drug is supposed to help with, and let me talk to you so I can find the symptoms to support that. You can tell how backwards that feels. That's what I was doing, but I wasn't aware of it at the time. This took a bit of work with other people to see that I had these 3 problems. Not only that I had those 3 problems, but I was also doing them out of order. So that was impeding my influence, ultimately. It was stopping me from seeing what was going on and taking effective actions. I was taking things that were only slightly effective or sometimes not at all. And so to shift over to enabling influence, here's where we want to go that will unlock a lot of this influencing and growth capability. First of all, I want to observe what's actually happening. I was missing so much. So what's actually taking place? What can I see that's going on? And then based off of that, how can I openly consider my interpretations? Instead of assuming I know what's going on and assuming I understand why it's important, how can I openly consider the possibilities? And beyond that, in action, then to select the most impactful actions. If you're like most people who I've talked to about this, you're probably at this point going like, that seems pretty logical, Mark. Pretty straightforward. Of course, I want to see everything that's going on, and I want to consider the possibilities, and I want to select the most important actions. Kind of, or to say it a little more rudely, duh, Mark. Like, this is not surprising to anybody, I don't think, on here. But there's a couple of things worth mentioning in relation to that, because it is pretty simple, if I can say. The right side seems simple. It's not like, I don't really have to convince you that that's good stuff. The challenge, first of all, is that it's in this order. It's really important that I start with awareness and then shift to analysis and then shift to action, and not start in the wrong place. But what's even more challenging for us is that this is not the way that we're wired to work, like our default mode, you might say. We're wired for the left side, for very quickly assessing a few of the parameters, because there's a lot of input data. So just selecting some input data and quickly analyzing and taking action off of it. And I'm not trying to say that that's not a good thing either. Let me be clear about that too, that there are plenty of instances where that is absolutely the most helpful thing that you can do, is to quickly filter down your data and analyze it and take action. Like, I like to use the example of, if a bear is charging at you, which I've thankfully never experienced, but imagine a bear was charging at you. You wouldn't want to become aware of everything. Oh, is there a butterfly over there? I wonder what direction the wind is blowing right now. Oh, look how soft their fur are. I wonder how long those claws are. Is that this many centimeters? I, I want to quickly see that there's a bear charging at me. That means danger. I need to run and run. And our bodies do that without us being aware of it, which is very helpful when a bear is charging at me. What I discovered with that team and that situation at the bank was that that type of unconscious work that my brain was doing there that I wasn't even aware of, hence this unconscious or subconscious part of it, that was actually impeding my influence, and that there was another gear I needed to find or another set of muscles I needed to build that would enable my influence over on the right side here. I know at least a couple of you here on the call, and I know you're learners, and so you're probably connecting some dots, and it's right to do so. There's a lot of places that this connects to. I didn't come up with these ideas, certainly. I just applied them. And the things that you might be thinking of are like fast thinking, slow thinking. Exactly. You're exactly where I'm talking about right now. We want to be able to slow ourselves down in appropriate times in order to really do better awareness, analysis, and action when that's the most beneficial thing to do. And I wasn't doing that in those situations, and therefore I was limiting my influence. So the things on the right, the challenge is, since it's built into us, that's like our default mode, we're going to have to do some work to get out of that gear to build a different set of muscles that we can use to enable our influence and growth. And that means it's going to feel slow. It's kind of like my warning. This is going to hurt, is what I'm telling you. The benefits are so very much worth it. We'll talk about in a second, but it's going to be a bit for you to build the muscles to be on the right side when you need to be on the right side. Don't think that it all has to stay that slow as you're going along. Okay, there's speed that you will learn as you're progressing in all of this, certainly. But it's going to start out slow. So I think I've made it sound painful enough. Let's talk about why you'd want to bother doing it. A few of the benefits. First of all, it just deepens your insights into situations. And I'm not just saying the word insight because that's my company name. I don't get a quarter every time it's said. I really mean you really get to see some of what's going on. And it's pretty uncommon to be that present in interactions that you have those types of insights. And what you'll discover, if that's unfamiliar territory to you, is that it's uncommon. And so when you're able to bring those types of observations to a group or person, it's very impressive. It's surprising in many cases when someone's saying, well, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, here's what I observed. And they're like, wow, really? And that type of interaction builds deeper connection and trust. When people get that you're trying to understand and see what's really going on, it deepens connection and trust. And these things, insight, connection, trust, these are all things that you need in order to increase your influence and impact, which is what we're going after here. So it increases the impact of your interactions. It supports teaching and mentoring. Actually, we use significant elements of what I'm about to go through here at Insight, both internally when we're growing with our teammates and ourselves, and also with our clients. Let's say somebody wants to learn how to teach or teach a specific material, or they want to learn how to be a scrum master or product owner. One of the things we do is we work with them on the awareness and say, go shadow, go observe, and really become deeply aware of what's going on and pair up with the person who's done it and talk to them afterward. It's a great learning experience. And it helps you also as a teacher and mentor in those situations. And this is some of how this was born, like I said, with that Scrum Master at the bank. It reveals empirical evidence. We're Agilists. And so we should care deeply and do care deeply about empiricism. It is so challenging, however, when we're talking about some of these soft stuff, soft things like interactions, right? And people. This thinking scaffold, as I'm starting to call it here, of awareness, analysis, action, enables us to build some empirical evidence that our actions are or are not being helpful, so that we can adjust, we can inspect, we can adapt, and this is this continuous improvement we're aiming at. All right, so enough selling you on it. Hopefully you're tracking with me there, and we can go into each of the parts. What we're going to do is we're going to go through these three: awareness, analysis, and action. I mean, these are deep wells of a lot of possibilities in each of these three things. What I'm aiming to do, though, is in each of them give you a starting spot. So if you're in awareness, like most of us struggle with awareness, honestly. So I'm going to spend most of the time in awareness. If you're like, wow, I can see how I really need to improve in this area, that's what I'm trying to do, is help you take a first step into that, to start to build your muscle. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk through awareness, for example. We'll talk about a first step. And in each of the steps, that first step here is going to be in the form of a canvas that you can fill out. And if you'd like the canvas, this is how you can get it. You can just email me, email address there at the bottom, or go to awareness2act.com, and you'll be sent to a forum where you can provide information and get this. You don't need it in order to learn from this, certainly, but if you want those canvases, that's how you can get it. We'll also talk about other steps you can take in addition to just that first step, that set of steps that's described on the canvas for you. And all the other information in the presentation is not in this canvas handout that I'm showing you right now. So you're going to want to stick around. Okay, let's head through awareness. And as I said, I'm going to spend most of the time out of the three in awareness. We're going to touch a little bit in analysis, and I'll probably fly through action, because the reality is we have plenty of options for action. That's usually not where I've discovered the problems. From an Agile perspective, we have lots of great tools. The question is how to become aware and then think about those situations we're in so that we can select the best tool. So that's why we're going to start with awareness. It's where most of us struggle and aren't even aware that we lack awareness in reality. The big problem we've got, I'll speak for myself. The big problem I had there at the bank that I, continue to see in reality for me, and many others have told me they see it in themselves as well, is that when we walk into situations, especially with groups that we're familiar with, we kind of feel like we know what's happening. We know what the problems are, we know how to fix them, those types of things. I mean, in some ways as consultants, that's what I am, me and my teammates at Insider are paid to do, is to have some of those ideas. So it's not all bad. And really an Agile coach, employee or consultant, that's part of why you're there, is because of your experience in there, that you can figure out what's going on and what's best to do. So I'm not calling that bad. I do want you to look at the other side of the coin, though. And part of the challenge in that is when we walk into situations, we tend to walk in with those assumptions and constraints, like big bricks like this, right? That have a lot of weight to them. And the reason why many of them have a lot of weight, if I can go deep with you for a minute, is because we're invested in them. Typically, especially if we've told somebody something, or if they're necessary to back up our benefit to the organization. To say it another way, in many cases, what we don't realize is we are holding onto these assumptions and conclusions like our life depends on it. Like we need them to be true. I need this conclusion to be true because I've invested so much time in trying to address this problem or work with this person, whatever the case might be. And when we put that much weight on our assumptions and conclusions, again, this is all stuff that we usually aren't even consciously aware is happening. When we aren't consciously aware of it and we put that much weight, when we need them to be true, when we put that much weight on them, what we do when we walk into situations is we're looking for evidence to support them because we need them to be true. We've put our beliefs on them, you might even say. So that causes us many times to skew the input information that we've got, right? Oh boy, there goes Bob again. Just like he did yesterday and last week, right? He's doing it because blah, blah, blah. Or I know Taryn and Sarah are best friends, so when they're over in the corner, talking to each other, that I know what that's about, right? That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about here, these assumptions, these conclusions, or, Andy is a troublemaker. Andy he's just not, he doesn't really care about the team's goals. This is a conclusion that I've drawn. Maybe the team would be doing so much better if only the managers would let them blah, blah, blah. I'm not asking whether it's true or not. That's not what I'm the point I'm making here. What I'm saying is if we feel like those need to be true, then we will find evidence to support it. I discovered something as a teenager when I was going through depression, and that is if you're looking for evidence to support something that's that important to you, you will find it every time. You're either doing it by filtering so that that's all you see, are the things you're looking for, or by skewing what's there so that it fits into what you're looking for. And yes, if again, you're all very good, curious people, I'm sure, that read a lot, you're going to say Mark's talking about biases, and that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. We're talking about biases, we're talking about cognitive perception challenges, if I can put it very nicely, or cognitive distortions in some cases about what we're seeing and what we're thinking about. So we distort some things, we also filter out a lot of stuff. If I draw it up, it kind of looks like this. Right? We're not looking at everything. We kind of have blinders on, and then we're skewing a lot of what's in front of us. This is a pretty significant problem. And again, I'm not calling assumptions and conclusions necessarily bad. It's just that it doesn't help us all the time, right? So let's look at this great quote. I think puts these assumptions in balance for us. Your assumptions are your windows on the world. Scrub them off every once in a while or the light won't come in. We put these assumptions like kind of on like glasses or like a filter that we're looking through. And the more of them that we have, the tighter the view is until we can just barely see through it. And we're mostly looking at our assumptions. Again, those serve us well in many cases with our experience, and sometimes they serve us very poorly. So the question is, can you look around them? Can you set them aside? Can you set them down for a minute? And that's what we're trying to do in this awareness section, is set them down for a minute, scrub them off for a minute. I'm not suggesting that you're just going to all of a sudden be like, oh, I have no assumptions and no conclusions. Really, the best way I can put it is in the analysis part of this, you can tell them to hold their breath over in the corner, because we're going to pull them back in the analysis part and hold them differently than we normally would. So just set them aside for a minute. All right, so that's kind of the theoretical, principled part of what I'm talking about. Let's get a little more practical. So what are we talking about when we're talking about becoming aware? The word I would use here is observation. It might be an easier word to actually see how it would work out for us. How do we observe what's going on? Or if we were in a room together, I'd say reading the room is a way that sometimes we refer to this. How can we be aware what's happening in an interaction? This can be difficult to see. But let's think about this for a minute. What stuff could we observe that's taking place in the room that we can actually observe? How about what's said? What people actually say, the words that they're saying? What about their volume that they're set at, or the tone of voice that they're set in? How about what's not said? Harder, but still possible for us to observe. Maybe body language. I know virtually you're only getting like this much body language, but you're still getting some body language, right? You could read, or expression, same kind of thing, or maybe lack of expression again. If we were in person, certainly spacing, how somebody is moving away from someone or always on the opposite side of the room or something of that nature can be something we can observe as well. Let's do a little interactive activity for this here. I'm gonna pull up a mural. Hopefully you all have heard of Mural before. This is a great little tool where we can do a little bit of we can do a little bit of interaction through it. And what I'm gonna do, if I can get over to chat here, is gonna put the link in chat. It doesn't require an account or anything. I would recommend, if you have Chrome, that you use Chrome for it. You can use other browsers, except I would not recommend Safari or Internet Explorer. They're not friends. That's all. But go ahead and bring up that mural, and let's just do a little kind of practice on this for a minute. I see people popping in there. You're going to be assigned an anonymous animal on your way in. That's fine. You don't have to create an account to do this at all. And I'm going to invite you momentarily here to watch a video that's in this mural. But let me pause real quick and make sure if anybody's having trouble getting in, that we help you get in, because I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of you in the meeting, and not all of you are in the mural yet. So it's fine if you don't want to or something, that's perfectly fine. But if you do, I want to make sure you get a chance to get in there. Let me know if you need some help. We can get you in. You've got all sorts of great animals: a sheep, a koala, giraffe, a hippopotamus. It's fun in the pool. Come on. All right. Haven't heard from any of you that you need help, but if you still do, feel free to unmute or put it in the chat and we can help you there. I'm going to summon you up to an area on the mural here, and I'm going to unhide it in just a second. It's a video of Sheldon and Penny. It's from Big Bang Theory, and don't worry if you don't know Big Bang Theory. You actually don't need to, and it might help you if you don't know it. You can double click on it, or if you just hover over it in the lower right-hand corner, you'll find that there's a little button that pops up that's open, and you can click on open down there and it'll open up the YouTube, and you can watch the ad and then watch that. What I want you to do is just take note of two observations, two things you observe from that video. Okay, so go ahead and do that. It's only a few seconds long there, maybe 60 seconds, and just take note of two things, two observations. All right. When you come back to the mural, you'll see there's a big area right there for you to add a couple sticky notes with your observations. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to let you add sticky notes in there. You just double click and it adds a sticky note, or you can right click and there's an option for add sticky note. Just add some of your observations. Okay. All right, so we got some great observations here. Very fixed mindset. She was frustrated with him. Very aware of things in his apartment, like the milk. Lack of awareness on his part for relationship assumptions and his priorities. By the way, good summary of Sheldon if you haven't met him. A difference in accent from Sheldon. Sheldon spoke in a Southern accent. Okay, he didn't see anything wrong with taking or using her things. And as Sheldon got more upset, his posture and accent and looks like some other things, choice of language shifted, probably changed. Yeah. Okay. Great. Now let's come back to, we'll come back to those in just a minute. come on back over to the screen share here for a minute, which I'm trying to do as well. There we go. Okay, let's talk for a moment about some things that can pollute our observations. And I'm going to give you 4 very common awareness polluters. The first one is called inside view. The second one is connecting cause. The third one would be evaluation polluter. And the fourth one is exaggeration. Let me describe them briefly and give you a few examples here so you can see how these play out. So from an inside view perspective, this is assuming things that are not directly observable, something on the inside. So this would be typically like thoughts or feelings or emotions. Mindset might be one, right? Things that are inside, you can't actually observe how someone's feeling. That's inside of them, or what someone's thinking about, that is inside of them. That is not actually observable. And so when we say that somebody was angry, we can't actually observe that. That's something we're carefully trained. Our brains are carefully trained to try and see some signs that typically mean angry. Okay. If you're using thoughts and emotions in what you're observing, it's got some pollution in it. And this is not meant to be like a bad. This is saying you've got something that's polluting it, and you can decide how important that is for your awareness, because that means that you're assuming that that's what's actually going on there. And so I would recommend when you're starting to build the muscle, you get pretty harsh with yourself about trying to remove as many polluters as you can. And you'll find there's a balance somewhere in the middle that's going to work pretty well for you over time, based on the groups of people that you're working with. Okay. An example here, Manesh was angry with Sharon. I don't actually know that Manesh was angry. I don't know that for sure. I can observe some things maybe that tend to lead me to think that Manesh was angry, right? That are typical of people who are angry. But what I would like to do to have clean observation is, what was it that I saw that Manesh did? That's what I want to take note of. That's a clean observation. All right, connecting cause, assuming causal relationships between observed actions. And the word that's often used here is the word because. That indicates you are indicating a causal relationship between the two, like Manesh raised his voice because Sharon shook her head. Now, what I can observe, first of all, Manesh raised his voice is an excellent observation. As opposed to saying Manesh was angry, I could say Manesh raised his voice. The volume of his voice was louder than it was before. That's raising his voice. Also, good observation, Sharon shook her head. I can observe that. That's actually observable. Great. The word because is where I got into danger here. I don't actually know, unless Manesh says it, that the reason he raised his voice is because Sharon shook her head. So to clean this up, I would typically say something more like, Sharon shook her head and then Manesh raised his voice. And that is clean because there was an action, there was a following action. So I can observe time and I can observe what people actually did. The connection between the two is the time link. I can't actually know for sure that there was a cause link just based on what I can observe in most situations. Third polluter is evaluation, judging an observed action. This usually involves a label or a comparison of some sort, labels being like good, bad, too much, too little, those kinds of things. So Manesh spoke too loudly. I can't actually observe he spoke too loudly. Too loudly for whom? I wish he hadn't spoken that loudly. Okay, well, that's not an observation, right? That's a judgment. That's an evaluation. You know, maybe I could observe that when Manesh raised his voice, Sharon, who was sitting next to him, winced or plugged her ears or something. That's observable, definitely. But too loudly, typically, you don't have something that's quite that blatant anyway. It's just louder than it was before. All right, exaggeration, over or understating what's been observed at the time. Very common, always, hardly, never. Those are common words like Manesh always argues with Sharon. Well, as it turns out, I'm not always around Manesh and Sharon, so I don't know always if they always argue. Also seems unlikely. Or never, or hardly, those kind of things. All right, so this actually is somewhat like behavioral science observations, I'm just gonna say. You don't have to go all the way to the extreme on this. However, the cleaner you can get this to start with, the more you're going to unlock the possibilities of what you're seeing, because every one of these is an assumption or conclusion that I'm drawing if I let the polluter in. And so I'm trying to draw back further so I can see what took place, not what I can't actually see and observe. So I'm trying to clean things up, awareness polluters. Let's practice with a couple of them here. So I'm going to give you an example observation, and you can use chat or unmute. We can have the conversation a little bit about whether it's one of these 4 polluters or if it's a clean observation. So here's the first one. Is this one clean or one of these 4 polluters? Jose was annoyed with Shauna. Jose was annoyed with Shauna. What do you think? Clean or one of those 4 polluters?
Polluter.
Okay. Yeah. Which one would you think that would be? What do you think?
Inside.
Inside view. Okay. Yeah. Can you?
Evaluation, actually. Evaluation maybe. Annoyed, the word annoyed.
Okay. So typically evaluation would be like it was good, it was bad, it was something like that. Annoyed is a little more emotion to me, so I tend to say inside view on it.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, the point here is that you can see it's got some pollution to it, regardless of what label we want to put on it, that it's not clean. So what would you think might be something that Jose did that I could have observed that I assumed meant he was annoyed? What was an action that I could have observed? What do you think it might look like?
Raised his voice or frowned or
Yeah.
glad.
Yep, he raised his voice, he frowned, maybe he rolled his eyes as the example I chose to use in this case for cleaner. Yeah, those are the things you can write down, you can capture, I guess you'd say, as a clean observation. Excellent. All right, what about this one here? Kayla mentioned the working agreements twice. Clean or one of the polluters?
I would say it's a clean observation.
Yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. I think it's pretty clean. Specifically, I can observe that Kayla mentioned the team working agreements and did it 2 times. That's pretty clean in my view. Yeah. All right, one more. Let's see here. April constantly interrupted everyone.
I would say that's exaggeration.
Yeah, it's double, isn't it? Good call, Sheila. Yeah, like constantly and everyone. It seems pretty impossible for that to be true. Suppose it could be, but we could clean that up a fair amount. That April interrupted Steve twice, for example, would be a cleaner observation maybe about that. So let's go back for a minute and apply this to your video observations. You go back to the mural, and if I draw you over to the categorize your observations section on the right side here, what I'm asking you to do is to grab your sticky note, or really there's a few I added in there too that I commonly hear in this exercise. Grab those and put them over into some of the categories over here. Clean in the upper left, not sure in the upper right, or you can drop them down into one of the 4 polluters down below, inside, connecting, evaluation, or exaggeration. Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know who that is, but Sheldon had a lack of awareness on his part. Now, let's talk through that one for a minute, because that's a really good tough one right there. Lack of awareness is a lack of awareness something that I can observe directly?
No, that was mine, by the way, this Gita. Um, it seems so. I think it's an inside view.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I mean, it could be that he's aware and he's choosing not to care or act on it, right? So there's another possibility here. And that's sometimes how I test myself, is to say, like, could there be another reason for what I observed? And if so, then that's probably polluted in some way. So yeah, I would agree that tends to be more of an inside view. Even, yeah, go for it. Yeah, please.
I did join like a bit later in the call, so I missed the initial introductions.
Yeah.
But sometimes it almost seems that you're placing raw ingredients versus the cooked product.
That's a good way to put it.
Sometimes in a busy world, where your insight might be needed. If there is, I'm not saying it's always right, but sometimes it may be useful to hear someone's insight, however we may call it, the inside view,
Yes.
just to get a sense of if you do not have the time to have 20 clean observations and then to see how they map together, you know?
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, that's well said. I like that raw ingredients versus the cooked product. And I'm a consultant, so I get paid to whip through these things pretty quickly and provide things like inside views. So I'll totally align with you that there are a lot of situations where that's important. And I gave the example earlier just for the sake of humor, like if a bear was charging at you, you wouldn't want to be figuring out the wind direction or counting the butterflies or something, right? There are definitely a lot of situations where you want to, it's most important, it's most beneficial to everybody if you will like doing the fast thinking, doing the reacting, even in the midst of your biases based on your experience. And the situation I found myself in that this was born in was one where I was doing that and that was actually impeding my influence. And so this can be a way to step back and slow down when it's helpful. But to your point, it's not always the right answer, certainly. All right, let's go back to the screen share here. And we'll finish out awareness. And like I said, you can tell since there's about 15 minutes left, I'm going to fly through the other two sections. But I promised you that we get to some tactical things, some first steps you can take to build the skills here to slow yourself down. And this is the one for awareness as a first step, is just in at least one situation, one interaction of some sort, capture some clean observations. And what I recommend you do is write them down or type them up. Because if you just keep them up here in your head, you can't inspect them. As empiricists, that should make a difference to us. We should make them transparent so we can inspect them and take a look at them and get them a little cleaner when those types of situations are most beneficial to us. And the way I'd love for you to think about this is capture things like a video recording would, or like an audio recording would. Or think about this like what's provable in a court of law. If you were up on the stand getting cross-examined and you said Jose was annoyed, what do you think the lawyer would do? He's going to say, how do you know for sure he was annoyed? And then you would give a clean observation. So try and think about how you would state things as if you were on the stand in a way. That can help you really clean up your observations. And certainly just also, I'll say this, Geeta, just staying in awareness is also unhelpful. So using it at the wrong time or only becoming aware of something is really not going to help you. It's connecting awareness to analysis to action where we find the value in this.
Yeah, true.
I mentioned the tool before. This is one of the pages in the tool. It's the simplest one as well. The canvas is really just a spot for you to take some specific observations with some prompts over here on the left of things to be observing and how to keep those in a clean format. Some other things you can think of if you want to get a little more advanced or start someplace else for your awareness is to focus on only one sense. So close your eyes or turn off the video feed if you're remote, or maybe plug your ears or turn the volume down if you're remote, and you will be surprised at how much that shifts what you're aware of that you can't, it forces you a little more towards clean observation, I'm going to say. So that's an interesting way to kind of trick yourself into it if you're having trouble getting there. Sometimes it helps to reflect your observation back. Sometimes this doesn't help, so it's not always helpful, but it can help you and invite correction back. And this is my favorite, absolutely. Pair up with somebody, get somebody else to observe the situation you're observing, and then compare notes afterward. And you'll be like, you saw what? When did that happen? I didn't see that, like guarantee. And that's actually my goal when I'm trying to become deeply aware and deeply present in a circumstance that I'm really familiar with the people maybe, or the context, is I want to be surprised by something. I want there to be something like, I had not seen that before. That's interesting. My curiosity is aroused. That means to me, I'm becoming deeply aware. So that's what I would recommend to you. If you walk out of a situation and you haven't gotten your curiosity aroused, maybe that's a situation where you might want to consider higher awareness. Okay, let's step on the gas pedal here. I'm going to run through analysis and really fly through action just so you can see how it fits together, because while awareness is one of the hardest things to get going, as I just said, it's by itself is not pointless. It becomes kind of weird and creepy for the people that you're observing. They're like, what are you doing? So let's take it to where it becomes valuable, actually. Analysis. I mentioned before that we have these like assumptions and conclusions that we bring into the situations that we're in, right? And I told you, I'm not expecting that we're going to just trash those. They're still there. In a sense, I'm asking you to say, like, put them on hold, let them hold their breath over in the corner while you're becoming aware of what's going on. This is the spot where we're going to bring those back from holding their breath. But we want to do it in a way that's different than the way that we normally hold it, like they have to be true. So let's just say we did an awesome job. We've got all these amazingly clean observations. It's been great. And we bring in our assumptions and conclusions, and they're going to tend to blot out some of those observations, even at best. So putting it in the right order, first of all, helps. We're filtering less, but it's still going to be challenging for us to see some of our observations because of these strongly held assumptions and conclusions. So we want to hold them differently than we did before. So let's talk about some keys to doing that. And this is really the foundation for this analysis section, is to say you need to express them openly, because you can't inspect what you don't express. What we're trying to do here is take what's happening up here quickly on our fast thinking that we don't even realize it's subconscious, and express it so it brings it into our conscious mind. So saying it, or even better, writing it down or typing it in, is really important for us. And we'll see how we can walk through this here in a minute. Explore alternatives, and then consider the impacts and the importance of what we've seen. So this is kind of the core of analysis here, and openly expressing them. See that word open on that first line? That's where we have some magic we can play. It's a bit of a trick. So if we're expressing it, we're tricking ourselves into bringing it into our conscious mind. And secondly, if we use the word wonder that we're about to see, it opens our hands a little bit, okay? Let's see how that goes. So first, as a first step in analysis, write down your initial assumptions. So you've done your awareness, you walk out of it, you're looking at what you've observed took place, and pretty clean observations, good. You're gonna have some assumptions and conclusions about why that happened or what's important. So write them down. It's fine that you've got them, but write them down and say, I wonder if this is why. I wonder if Manesh raised his voice because he was angry at Sharon. And what I've just done is, instead of it having to be true for reasons, right? Some of them very deeply held beliefs, but instead of them having to be true and I'm gripping them, I have opened my hand and say, I wonder if that's what the case is. And what that enables me to do is then step 2, consider alternatives. So I've got several possibilities once I've done that, and then I can look at what the impacts are and identify what the most important items are. Gas pedal is firmly being pressed down by me right now. You can see though that this builds. And instead of me coming with a tool and coming back through analysis and then finding observations to support this tool that I might like, instead I'm stepping through very intentionally and saying, let me see what the options are. Let me see what the likely impacts are from this, and what's most important about this that I'm going to go take action on. So we've set ourselves up for action really well if we do this intentionally. Here's how the page looks in the canvases. Just walking through the wonder statement, the alternative wonders or possibilities, the impacts, and then the priority of what's most important to work on. Unfortunately, we do not have time for analysis practice. Okay, some other things you can do in addition to those steps are to reflect first, which is a way of arousing your curiosity. If you're not curious, it's not going to work. If you're certain, stop. just don't. You're gonna waste your time. So if you're certain about something, then just act on it. That's fine. But if you can, arouse your curiosity, because that'll really help you explore this further. Sometimes flipping the script and identifying what you don't know. And again, I love outside perspective. What if you had clean observations that you captured, wrote them down or typed them up, and then you took them to somebody else and said, what do you see in here you're curious about? Or what do you assume is going on here? Again, that can shift your thinking, because you'll see it from someone else's perspective, and they may not have all the context you do, and that actually can help you see other possibilities. Some other things you can do here, you got agreed upon standards of some sort, your team working agreements. Maybe you're using a framework like Scrum or something like Kanban, or your definition of done, or the organizational thises, or the product goals, or what are standards or goals are there? And then that can help you in that impacts section to say, what are the potential impacts to this? We're going to go empirical land now. If you've done previous awareness observation journals, you can compare to the past and say, That's interesting. How has this shifted? And likewise, if you've gone through the whole thing of awareness, analysis, and action, you've taken actions, and now you're back through another awareness and you're in analysis, you can say, how did those actions have an effect or not? Very empirical way to address working with a group of people to try and help them grow and improve. All right, finally, action. Again, as I've said, we usually don't have a problem finding tools. We've got plenty of them. Our challenge is picking them. And we're going to pick them based on impact, which is why we did that at the end of the analysis section is what impact are we trying to have? Let's start there and then go to our tools. And that shift is the key part that you'll see here in this section of the tool. So first of all, express your desired impact and then pick the most effective action that you feel like you can take to have that impact. It's like writing a user story and starting with a so that, the end of the sentence. So here's the impact we want to have. What's the most effective action I could take to get there? That's what's on the canvas right here to help you continue to think through it. If you are going, Mark, you say there's a library of tools, but I really don't know what you're talking about. Here's 3 I would recommend you consider. Management 3.0, which I know both Dandy People and Insight offer Management 3.0, amongst other places. There's a good wealth of things you can pull from Management 2.0 for practices, tools you can use. Liberating structures that Patrick was talking about earlier, that apparently there was a session earlier today. Amazing set of tools, very good. Professional coaching has anyway, these are my favorites. I'm sure you have your favorites as well. The point being, don't feel like you don't have a lot of options. There's a ton of options in here. The key is knowing which ones to go for. Always pull out the 3 basic teach, mentor, coach stances, and that there's a wealth of approaches you can use in each of those, like coach or professional coaching, powerful questions as an example of a tremendously strong tool you could potentially use as an action here. Get help and escalate. Those are always options. And if you go, I just don't know enough after doing awareness and analysis, then don't be afraid to loop back around and observe again, or check assumptions or inquire with somebody. Other actions you can take, measurement. An empiricist would always say measurement. And then if you have measurement, then you can have a hypothesis statement like this. I believe that taking this action will have this impact, and here's how I'm going to see it, observe it through measurement. And then last but not least, a good behavioral science play here. Thank you, Kelly from Dandy People. How could the environment be shifted to support and enable the desired behavior? It's probably something systemic. So that's definitely something to consider. In closing, a few final thoughts. Start by slowing down. In the spots where you're stuck in your influence, take a deep breath, slow down, observe, pair up with somebody, right? Become more aware, and it will unlock a lot of things for you. Second of all, don't forget the positives. A lot of the examples I gave were things, in fact, I think all of them were not good things, right? So-and-so is angry. That probably isn't good if they're not resolving that and doing that in a productive way. What am I going to do about that, right? And that's kind of natural for us to look at things that might be negative about that, or somebody's withholding information or something. There's also positive stuff. So don't forget that side of the coin. What's going well in what I observed is a really good analysis thing to consider, because you want to also take actions to protect that and to encourage it, not just to address the things that aren't going so well. And finally, no surprise, it's always better in community. As I have said, this has been built in community over and over and over again. Okay, that's the last insight slide there, but another reminder that you can get the Awareness to Act canvases, the 3 canvases I just talked about. Right there, there's my email or on that website, either way. All right, so left us a few minutes after flying through the last section there at warp speed for us to have a little conversation about this, and happy to go back, revisit some things if you want to, or if you just are wondering, you know, how this might help you or what situations it might be most helpful in, let's talk about it. What kind of questions or thoughts do you have?
Made me realize that when we are talking about observations, it's often the what and the how, and it's the why that is a bit that needs to be done super carefully.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So that's the second quotable. Am I allowed to quote you on these in the future? The raw ingredients
Of course.
as well. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. The why is usually a spot of conjecture for us. Yeah.
Professional coach, by the way. I don't know if that matters, but
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. Awesome.
Mark, I have a question which is not related to this session, but as you know, I already attended this session. Do we have like the next session, or say episode 2 of this session, which is like more doing more practice of awareness, how we can do that practice in our day-to-day life, and
Yeah.
how we can apply, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, we're developing, I'd say a curriculum, but we're developing a set of workshops that help you walk through this basically. So yeah, this is warp speed definitely, but actually walking through and saying, okay, come back next week having observed something, and then pair up with somebody in the class, right? To go through that. So we're working on a curriculum like that and running it internally to Insight first. But yeah, that's something that we're working on, because it's much better to learn those things with other people and go and apply them and come back and learn. Yep. That's on the way. Good question. Thanks for letting me advertise it.
looking forward to getting that, because I attended this, I grasped this, I know mural and all stuff, this is cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to grasp something more.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Mark, for letting us host you. It was really interesting, and I think I could listen to you for a couple of hours more. And I really like the "I wonder if" question during analysis, and it's quite similar to the design sprint question. How might we? They have in there, like, how might we do a solution to this problem? Yeah.
Right. It really softens some things up that way. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thanks for having me. It's been
Yeah.
good. Thanks, Patrick. And good to see you again, Saruchi. And Sheila, good to meet you.
Yes. And thank you. And this is, as I said before, this is recorded, so it will show up on Agile20Reflect webpage in their archives, and it will also show up on our YouTube channel. So
Sounds good. I look
the
forward to
same
it.
with the liberating structures that we talked about. So
Excellent.
so
All right.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Patrick.
you. Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.